Welcome to another Nonsense Wars train thing. Today we look at my 1:48 scale model of a classic diesel, the ALCO PA. ALCO and GE built these engines as a joint venture in the late 40s and early 50s, but they did not sell as well as contemporary EMD, E, and F units. Of around 300 produced, only a handful survive, despite its iconic appearance. I did not originally intend to make a PA. I personally prefer the shark nose styling of the competing Baldwin RF-16, but one of my ongoing projects, the Union Pacific 8080 coal turbine, requires a modified PA, so I figured I would do a proper one along the way. I would have liked to make the model buildable with contemporary common parts, but the etymology of the design complicates things. I've been working on the 8080 erratically for several years. The modified PA derives from my even older RF-16, and I haven't been able to find contemporary replacements for some older parts. The hinged windshields in particular have become very expensive in the past few years, though the dark green hood pieces and the dark gray roof pieces don't come cheap either. For the nose, I could have used bright green, but it felt much less accurate, and for the roof, I could have used light gray, but it felt even more expensive. The dark gray situation might get even worse for the rest of the 8080. The body uses considerable snot to position the texture bricks on the sides. I see a lot of people using grille tiles for this feature on similar locomotives, but I had long since settled on my own design. I also see a lot of people using printed 1x2x2 panels for the portholes, but I felt that 1x2 Technic bricks had more accurate size and color, at least for the PA. The center door also needed some interesting reinforcement in order to not further weaken an already fragile body. In both the U30 and Charger videos, I remarked about building a drivetrain where I could change batteries without messing with wiring, a moderate pet peeve of mine. To this end, the PA finally implements a setup where I can remove all of the electronic components as a single part. The slightly too short receiver cable and the somewhat loose receiver mounting still make it a little fiddly, and we'll see how useful this feature actually is. This design really does incorporate learnings accumulated from several past models. In my earliest power function engines, especially ones on bogies, I used to place motors, receivers, and battery boxes separately, and often I used the weight of the battery box to press studded drivetrains together, usually through a relatively bulky Technic frame. I iterated on these paradigms while designing subsequent models. For example, the geared R50B showed that I could build electronics into one assembly. The leader showed that a single XL motor could pull most reasonable loads at moderate speed, and the Charger showed that I could make enough space to drive two bogies with one motor, even with a large battery box. I also tried something new with the 3-axle bogies. My previous ones on the ACE, QJ, and D2 all utilized sliding center axles to navigate tight curves, but the length of the PA bogies, each more than a third of the engine, discouraged me from using the same approach. As with the leader, I decided to articulate them, but not in the same way. I only hinged the outer axles and drove the inner four. Historically, the PAs did only have 4 powered axles, but in an A1A configuration. These bogies gave a surprising amount of trouble. The passive axles need to carry enough weight to stay on the tracks, but not so much weight such that the powered axles lose traction. Pushing a train also adds additional lateral forces that encourage derailing. I tested several bogies at several trains in the park sessions before I found a working design. I originally hinged each passive axle with a pair of fish plates, one on each side, connected with a pin. This joint proved floppy and often worked itself apart as the locomotive rode over bumps. Eventually, I added a second fish plate to one side of the hinge and connected it with a held axle. This made the joint much more rigid and less likely to fall apart. Given that this setup works well enough on our rough outdoor track, I'd hope it also works well enough on smoother indoor track. Finally, while the PA and the leader both use that single XL motor, the drivetrain setups differ in that the PA runs 5-3 gearing with small wheels, while the leader runs 1-1 gearing with large drivers. Still, this nets out to about the same performance. I can only describe it as adequate. Both engines have reasonable low-speed torque and reasonable top speed, though nothing to write home about. Like most geared engines, the weight of the PA limits traction far more than the drivetrain, though the unit still weighs more than enough to brake couplers, even without batteries. Anyway, this engine obviously gets rebuilt when I finish the actual UP8080. Perhaps I will get it done for Bricks by the Bay in 2022, so stay tuned for that. Please consider subbing if you like what we do, but on that note, this is the end of the video, so have a nice day.